Welcome back. Thank you so much for joining the second part of Survey 123. I'm really pleased with how many of you have shown interest, and this is really great technology. So thank you for your interest, and I think you'll find that the Survey 123 really helpful, and hopefully this class as well. So with that, let's get started. There's quite a bit to get through. As always, I start out thinking that I don't have enough information, and then when I put the final touches on my workshop, suddenly I'm just wondering if I can cover it in 2 hours, but I'll record the entire thing. So right now this training is being recorded. So we'll start off with just a quick refresher where we left off last time so that we can build on it. Then the only one of the few data types that we have not talked about yet are the file attachments, which is pretty simple, straightforward. We'll talk about repeats and some of the pros and cons of using them. As a matter of fact, I opted never to use them, but they might still be helpful for you. Some other functions that I have used in the past that have been helpful to me. We'll move on to styling your survey, making it a little bit easier for people to get through it and not be overwhelmed, when they first open up your survey and there's so many questions there. Then we'll talk about pool tables, which are really helpful. And as I'm talking, I can hear it myself. It sounds like pool table, but it's not as much fun as an actual pool table. Then we'll try and sort of string things together. So we'll take a web app and we'll launch our surveys like right off that web app, and then actually have the survey results also appear back on the same app. So just kind of wrapping your entire survey inside another app. And after that, we'll even integrate it and show the survey results in a simple dashboard. So I guess to whet your appetite for the next class, which is later on this month. We'll talk about reports and how you can create custom reports out of Survey 123. And finally, we'll talk a little bit about webhooks, which allows you to string together different apps. And so the example that we will talk about is every time somebody submits a survey, it then can automatically send you an email saying that the survey has been submitted. So with that, let's get going. We'll start out with a quick refresher. Last time, right after the class, it was pretty evident that between when I created the content for the class and when it was the Survey 123 Connect was updated, there's been some changes. And so just to make sure that everybody sort of understands the different parts of the Survey 123 Connect app, I'll just put them side by side. So first we'll look at the older version, where last time we looked at the form preview, which is what you're looking at on your screen right now. You can look at the schema preview, which is basically just how it appears in a table if you were to export it. We talked about the settings, so how you can style your survey. For example, what the map should look like, what colors you want to have in your survey, and so on. We had our Excel spreadsheet that's associated with it, where you can control all the questions in the survey. There's a folder associated with every survey where you can store your thumbnail, tables, images. And this is one that we'll be working with today when we start talking about the pool data function. And then you can update it after you make changes. For example, after you add an extra table to your files, a file folder, or maybe you made some changes there. So the update will basically refresh and allow you to look at it again. Then we had the publish button. And here are the same items, but in the new interface. So again, to see what the form looks like, which is the screen that we're on right now, to preview a structure of the table, which is officially called a schema, or schema, if we had to do it in Dutch, it's an actual Dutch word, then you would click there. You can style your survey, so there's different opportunities here. To open up these Excel spreadsheets, you can do that at the top left. The files associated with the survey is the big black dot. To refresh the survey and show the most recent changes, you click on this button. And this one confused me because at first I thought it was somebody with like hunched shoulders and a head, but I think it's a pin on a map. So I guess it could be either one. You can publish your survey. You can set your map options. So the type of background that you want on your map, the type of base map, the zoom scale of your map that you would like to see inside your survey. You can set your title and your thumbnail. And then finally, there's options you can set. For example, if you wanted to have like an inbox or a send box associated with your survey. All right, so that kind of catches us up on the interface, the old one as well as the new one. Okay, and then instead of having an arrow pointing left, it now has a square, which basically means to return to the main menu. Okay, so last time we have seen that you can have different types of questions, which are in this type field. So for example, the first one, it says select one type. You can see that is a multiple choice question. And so each row on this spreadsheet corresponds to one question in your survey. And so I don't want to dwell on it too long because we spent about 2 hours on it a few weeks ago. All right, and so for the type, we covered most of them. So for example, here, when you look at the category, you can have the select one for a list where people can pick from, but they can only pick, one answer, or they can have a select multiple, where they can then obviously select multiple. And when you look here, it says select one category. That basically means that we need to have a list with the options that people can choose from, which you can find on the sheet, the worksheet right next to the survey, which is called the choices sheet, which you can see on the right here. So the list and all the options are found on the choices tab. So with that, let's just get started. So I'm gonna stop my PowerPoint. I'll be going back and forth quite a bit. And we need to kick off Survey123 Connect. So I'll just go ahead and type it in my start box and fire it up. Okay, so we're going to create a new survey. And I am going to call it Survey123 Part 2 Survey. And I am going to put a fee 2 at the end because I created the first version as I was putting this training together, but you don't have to do that. Okay, so then we'll click on the advanced template, so you can see that's highlighted here, and then we'll click on create survey. Okay, then it's asking you to add a number of questions, and you can sort of see them on the PowerPoint here. But to save you a little bit of time, when I emailed you your workbook this morning, I also sent you a spreadsheet called Copy and Paste Snippets. So let me open that too. And so instead of typing it out, and you can see I organized it by the different sections of this class. So we are still in the first part where we leave off. So I'll go ahead and I'll copy this. And then I can just paste it into my new spreadsheet. Okay. And I'll just close this out here. All right, so let me see what that looks like in my Survey123 Connect. So once I hit save on my spreadsheet, I should see my survey. Okay, and so I basically just set this up so we got something to work with, and I didn't want to start all the way from scratch and having you type everything in. Okay, So for the next couple of parts, we will be working with this particular survey. So next, we'll try out a new data type that we haven't used that. So on our spreadsheet, let's add an extra field. Let's see, where did my spreadsheet go? Nope, the other one. Here. Okay, I'm just going to add in an extra field. Just to be on the safe side, I would always recommend using the drop-down and then finding it. So I'll just go down and I will find type file. I will call this, let me just go down here, your resume. That seems to go well with the previous questions. And I'll just ask people to please attach your resume. Okay, so when I save this and I go back to my Survey123 Connect, I just keep thinking that's like a person spinning up and down. Okay, when we go down, we should see our new question. So it says, please attach your resume. And so when people then click on that, it will basically just open up a folder or their file explorer, and then they can just go ahead and attach the file that they want. Okay, so that was short and sweet. So let me go back to the PowerPoint and let us continue. Okay, from the current slide. Okay, so the next one are repeats. And so let's say that, well, the survey already contains a question, you know, please tell us where you work. But what if we wanted to get like a whole work history? And so to ask people, well, please list all the agencies you have worked at. We don't know how many agencies they have worked at. So one thing we can do is basically just repeat the question and say, well, which agency did you work at? How many years? What is another agency that you worked at? How many years? What is yet another agency that you work with? How many years? So we can separate them out in different questions, or we can use something called a repeat. And so on the survey, it will look like this, where you can type in your agency, how long you've worked there, and then when you click on the plus here, it will basically just repeat that question. And you can choose yourself how many times that will be repeated. So let's try that. So back on your spreadsheet for the survey, let me go down here. So here it asks you what agency you work for. So I'll just put in an extra little bit of space there and a little bit of space back here. And I'll just say, I'm going to keep asking those two questions over and over. So again, it's most safe to grab the data types from the drop-down list, so you're sure that you're not mistyping it. And we are looking for a begin repeat. And then here we're looking for an end repeat. All right. So for the begin repeat, if I were to save it right now, it really complains if you have like a begin statement, like a begin repeat, and a little bit later on, for example, like a begin group will work with that. It doesn't like it if you don't give it a name. It's kind of silly because the name will never ever show up anywhere. But you know, let's give it a name. Let's call it repeat at work. Okay, so with that, let me just go ahead and try it out. So those are the pieces that I just put in new. Also, one thing I started doing, it's not in the manual, but I started color coding different pieces of my spreadsheet. I find it's much easier to try and find back where you were. So I'll just color those green so I know that I've been working on those. So let me go ahead and save that and take a look at my Survey123 Connect. So it's complaining that it doesn't have a label. Okay, I'm just gonna go ahead, copy and paste this. We can get away with not putting in a name and a label for the end repeat, but doesn't like the begin repeat. Okay. So the warning that was there was still there from the previous time that I saved it. Okay, so here is my repeat at work. So I can type it in. So for example, I worked at the Idaho Department of Water Resources, and I worked there for 6 years in total, not 56, 6. And then I say plus, and then those questions show up again. So I worked for the Idaho State Tax Commission, and I was there for 5 years. And then I hit plus, and then you can just keep going on and on and on and on. So I'm not sure if you're already thinking about ways that you might be able to use this. In many ways, it is really, really quite handy.
May I ask a question?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
How does this show up in the resulting feature class table?
That is a really good question. And that gets to the and shoot you part. So I'm going to go there next because while it shows up real nice in the survey, what comes out of it is maybe harder to handle. So let me contrast them side by side.
Okay.
All right, so shoot you. Okay, so if you're not using the repeats, and so the survey designer decides how many times this question is being asked, when you look at the results, and that here I downloaded it as a table, it just basically shows up just as a flat file. It just all shows up inside the Excel table or CSV table or shapefile or file to your database, however you downloaded it. The difference between the no repeats and using the repeats is that for the repeats, the user, so the survey taker, controls how many times they repeat it. When you download it, it shows up like this. So this is the main table, and you can tell that between the zip code to the right of it, so there's your zip code, and it really doesn't have any of the information in it right there. Where those repeats are being stored is in a related table. So here you can see the different times I went through and answered this question. And then the parent global ID is linked back to the global ID in the previous table to try and match this back together. And so I would say, especially if you're planning to do more work with this, for example, script against it, or depending on how you would like to store and process the collected data, this may not be the way to go, but it depends on what you'd like to do with the data. So to the person who just asked the question, did I answer your question?
Yes, I understand that. Thank you.
Okay. All right. And so for me personally, when I have used this, and that was mostly at my time at Water Resources, we started out with repeats and we quickly moved away from it because they were more difficult to process. All right. So yeah, so I just mentioned how they are joined together. Okay, this section I'm really quite excited about. There's some really useful functions that you can put in your survey. And if you can check again to see if you're unmuted, that would be great. So the string length is basically a function that checks to see if an answer, like what's been put in like a previous question, an answer to a previous question, if the length of that text, assuming it's like a text question or a select one or select multiple, if that's been filled out or not. So for example, here, if I type in my name, as soon as I start typing, then the string length of this value name is going to be more than 1. And so if you, for example, wanted to control the flow of your survey, where certain questions don't show up if one or more previous questions have not been answered, you can use this little technique right here. So in this case, when you look at this survey here, the zip code question, when you go to the relevant column, so that's the column that determines if this question is visible or not visible, you can see that this question about zip code should only appear if the string length of the name is greater than 0. So as long as this name field is empty, this question will not appear. But as soon as somebody puts in anything, text, then it will appear. Oh, and that then is the behavior that you would expect. So with that, let's just give it a try. Okay, so back in my survey, I am going to put in on my Excel spreadsheet, so this one here, what is my name, zip code, and I'll need to go to the right to find my relevant column. Default calculation relevant, there we go. So I am going to say that this is only relevant if the string length of the name field is greater than 0. Okay, and hopefully you guys remember that $signs, curly brackets from the previous time. Basically what this means is it's kind of like a mailbox, and it says, okay, look in the mailbox called name. And as soon as you answer this question here, there's my mailbox. As soon as you type in an actual name, that name goes into that mailbox. So it's basically looking for and seeing if this variable, this mailbox has been populated. All right, so let me save it, and then we can try it out. So the expected behavior is that I am not seeing a zip code. All right, that's right, I see my name, but not the zip code question. And then I'll type in my name, and there it is. And so this seems really quite simple, but it is really quite a handy little trick to control the flow. And hopefully you're like me and you end up using this like way more, because it's just a really good little check to see if a question has been answered or not answered. Okay, so that brings us to the next function. So let's go down. Okay, so this one here, let me show it from this slide. This one is really handy too. So basically, this is like an if-then type statement. So you can really control, you know, the flow again of your survey. Although in this case, what we'll be using it for, you may have noticed that some of the questions are asking you if you have experience with ArcGIS Online, if you have experience with dashboards. And so what we're going to do is, using this if statement, we are going to add up how many times a person says yes. And I've seen this, for example, in a survey for food inspections. And so somebody might have like a little checklist or like a survey that basically just checks off, you know, is do you observe this violation? Do you observe that violation? And so if there's like 20 different violations that they can or cannot violate, at the end you might want to have a tally, like how many did they violate and how many did they pass. So the if statement might be a really handy way for, you know, counting things like that. Okay, so at the bottom of your spreadsheet, I want you to add 4 more lines. And I put those in that snippets Excel spreadsheet as well. So let me go ahead and I'll open up my snippets. So those are my 4 lines right there. And then I'll go back to my spreadsheet for my survey, and I'll just paste them right in there. Okay, so the purpose of those questions is I want to see that if somebody is familiar with ArcGIS Online, and this was a yes/no question, so if they say yes to ArcGIS Online, I want this to count as the number 1. Like, and again, you know, if they are familiar with Survey123, that is another competency. So if they say yes to both of those, I want their GIS competencies, the number of them, to be 2. And if they say yes to all 3 of them, then I want the number of competencies to be 3. And so I put those in to basically assign the number 1 or 0, depending on whether they said yes or no earlier on. Okay, so let's see if we can construct that function. Okay, from the current slides. All right, so the condition. So if condition, so you set up sort of like a comparison, that's the condition. If the comparison is true, so what you say is true, then between the first 2 commas is what happens. If it's not true, then the last piece of this function will happen. So what I am saying here is, okay, somebody said, are you familiar with ArcGIS Online? The answer was either yes or no. So I'm saying if basically this mailbox that somebody answered right there, if this mailbox here, this variable here contains the answer yes, then I want this ArcGIS Online competent to have the value 1. And if they said no, then I want it to be a 0. And so over time, there were 3 of them, right? All of them will be either set to a 1 or a 0, and then at the end, we can just add them up. Okay, so let's enter in this calculation. And in essence, you can basically just enter in all of them. So the first one here we just talked about. The second one is, well, if you're familiar with Survey123, if they answered that question with yes, well, then this Survey123 competent is going to be 1, otherwise it's going to be 0. The same with them being familiar with dashboards. So all of those 3 are now either the value 0 or 1. And then in the end, we can just add them up for the last question. So the total number of competencies is really this value plus this value plus that value. Okay, so let's put that in the survey and see if that works as we expect. Okay, so again here I put them in the snippets to help save you some typing. So there are my 3 equations. So let me copy those. And then I need to go to the spreadsheet for my questions. So there they are. I need to go to the calculate field. There it is, my calculation. And I'll just put them in like that. So I hope that makes sense. All right, so go ahead and save it. And I guess the moment of truth here. So I am going to ask if you are familiar with ArcGIS Online. Let's say you are. Survey123. Well, you did the first class, right? So yes. Familiar with dashboards? Maybe no. And let me see why that did not work as expected. Maybe because I forgot to save it. This always happens, right, when you're trying to teach something. Okay. If familiar with ArcGIS Online equals yes, then give it a 1, otherwise a 0. It's an integer. And that should work. Okay, well, I'm gonna have to come back to this at some point. I'm hoping that it is working for you, because right at this instant, I cannot see why that would not work. Because we are comparing that, saying if it's yes or no. Oh, I see why it's not working. All right, on the choices sheet, I changed the uppercase letters to the uppercase letters here, just because I like them to be the same. So let's give that another try. And so it was looking for yes, the lowercase yes, because it's looking for what's in the name field and not in the label field. Okay, so let's try this one more time, and if it doesn't work, we will move on. All right, so competent, yes, yes, no. Total number of competencies is 2. And I guess the warning with that to always make sure that when you set them, when you do the comparison here, for example, like the yes here with the capital letters, that this perfectly matches even, case-wise, upper, lowercase, then it works. Okay, let's see where we left off here. Back to my PowerPoint. I think I have one more useful function. Actually, no, those were my 2 useful functions, and I use both of them quite a bit. So hopefully they're useful to you as well. So that brings me to styling. So we'll talk about how we can organize our survey in groups, pages, and grids. And typically dividing them up in groups makes it easier for people to see it. So instead of being presented with a very, very long survey, they just see the headings of different sections of the survey. So next, I would like to show you how to put that together. So groups are controlled by the begin group and end group data types. And just like with the begin and end repeats, they do require a name and a label. For the beginning part, at least. The ending part, you don't have to. So let's just go ahead and change our survey so that we can put in some of the groups. So for the info about you, it used to be a note here, so we'll change that to begin group. We'll add in an extra line for the end group, and again, this used to be a note, so we'll turn that into a begin group, and then we'll just add the end group on a new line. Okay, so with that, let me go back to my survey. I'll make it a little smaller so we can see it all. So here is my first note, the information about me. So this note, I'll turn it into a begin group. And again, I recommend picking it from your drop down. Then we need to make a little bit of extra space here. And then we'll put in the end group. And again, I was just about to type in the letter E for end, but it is important to get the spelling just right. Okay, and so for the begin group, I said we needed a name and a label, and luckily we still have that left over from the note. Okay, and let's see where else we needed that. So we need another one for info about GIS. So we'll turn this again into a begin group. And then after that, we will need an end group. See, there I go again. I just have this bad habit of just typing it in. End group. There we go. So let me save that and see what it will do to my survey. Okay, so you can tell this is new, right? There's some information about you, which you can close and open. and then also some information about your GIS experience that you can open and close. So I believe there's one person who's still not muted, that is typing away. So can you check again to make sure you're muted? If you're on the phone, there's probably a mute button there too somewhere. Okay, so I think it would be really nice, instead of having this all open and showing people like all the questions, even if they're better organized into groups, what if we can just close them up? And then the survey looks, a lot shorter for those people, and they can just kind of immediately have an overview of what they can expect during the survey. So we can do that by changing the appearance of those groups, and we need to set those to minimal compact. Okay, so I need to go to the appearance question, and we are looking for minimal compact. There we go. And then there was another group here, minimal compact. Okay, so let me save that and see what it will do to my survey. And you can tell that those two groups, there's some information about you and GIS experience, are now both collapsed when you're starting. Okay, so next, and I must say I have not used this a lot, but I'm pretty excited about starting to use it, are different pages, where instead of each group, open collapse, but in the same long form, it actually goes page 1, page 2, page 3, very similar to like SurveyMonkey, right? Okay, so to make that change, let me just make this small again. We need to make another change. We need to go to our settings tab, and in the style column right there, well, to say that we want to style them as pages. And along with that, it very specifically wants you to set the appearance to a field list. So then we need to go back to the survey and change the minimal compact to a field list. So this is a very specific appearance that only goes with those pages. So let's go ahead and save that again and see what it does to our survey. Make it a little bit smaller. All right. So you can see we have the repeats here, but you can see here we are on page 1 of 2. And then when you click to go to the next page, now we are on page 2 of 2, you get more information. Okay, let's see, we've done that. Begin group, end group, minimal compact. We have changed that. Okay, so the question is, are you missing any questions? So do we have all the number of GIS competencies on there? And it looks like we do, so that's good. If not, what you can do is make sure that you use your last end group to below all your other questions there. So then there is yet another one, which I am pretty excited about trying out a little bit more, is to use grids. And so instead of having your questions like all one on top of the other, this finally, and it's pretty new, I think, allows you to put questions side by side. So let's do that. So we need to go back to our settings tab and change the style from theme grid, or excuse me, from pages to theme grid. So let me go ahead and do that. settings, theme, grid. And I can see this being really helpful. For example, I was talking about that food inspections earlier. That might just be nice, especially if you have like short little questions. You can put a couple right next to each other with just the yes, no in there. And then on the survey, for the appearance, you need to tell it how many columns you want it to have next to each other. So for the top one, let's say that you want to have, let's see here. Let's see for the top one that you want to have 2 columns. And I think you can go up to 8 columns in your grid, although then your questions become, you know, like really, really narrow. So let's do this one as a W2. So not sure why it's a W, but 2 columns. And just click yes, because this is a valid entry. And the other one will just make it into like 3 columns. So we can kind of compare and see what this would look like. Okay, so let me go ahead and save this here. And then I guess drum roll, please. See how this turns out. Okay, and I'll make this a little bit wider so it's easier to see. But you can tell that there are 2 grids right next to each other. And then for the next group, you can see it actually has the 3 questions right next to each other. So with those new options, you really have quite a bit of choices on how to, you know, put your survey together and how to format it and how to put your questions together. And I guess the main point would be is keep your audience in mind. What was it in ArcGIS Online? I said you want to make your map readable, not to the person with the least knowledge, but the person who's like least interested in learning about your job. So I guess here the survey too is you want to make it attractive enough that maybe the person least wanting to actually fill out your survey is willing to do so. All right, so with that, I think I am done with the groups, pages, and grids. I do want to point out just a very excellent blog, and also I put this sheet right here, right in your workbook, which I copied from this blog right here. This Ishmael Shaifite is like the main Survey123 guy, so if you go to the ESRI conference, you probably meet him there. But this has some really good information. For example, at the bottom here, you can tell that you might have set 3 columns, but maybe some of the questions will take up, you know, the first 2 of those 3 columns, and some of them will just be just one of those 3 columns. So you can kind of organize how within those 3 columns the questions are organized. And some of them might actually cover like all 3 columns all at once. And so this bottom part here explains to you how to do that. But if you want to learn more also about the pages and the groups, the material for this class, I basically just went through this blog and I'm like, well, this is really cool. I sort of could put this piece of this class together and just try it out myself. So hopefully you will too. Okay, so next we will talk about HTML code. And so first I'll talk through this entire slide, and then we'll just go ahead and try it. So the styling, so colors and you know, the font type is all controlled through HTML tags. And some of you may be familiar with those, others maybe not. So let's start with like an easy one. So when you look at the first one here, you can see the label right there. You already have that. And so we put an I tag in front of it. So I is for italic. It will turn your font italic. And then again at the end. And I can tell that I did something interesting here. Typically you want to nest them. So you would want to put the I on the inside. And then anytime you see like a slash and an I, for example, here, it means that's the end of it. So what this means is at this point, start typing in italics. So it will type in italics until it hits the slash I, and then it will stop doing that. And similarly with the bold, it says start typing your font in bold here, type, type, type until you get there, and then stop doing it in bold. And I really should have reversed those two tags so that the two I's are on the inside and then the two bolts, the two B's are on the outside. So I'll do that correctly when we try it out. Okay, we can change the font color by using this font tag. So this font tag has different properties. And so in this tag, we can set, for example, the color. We can set the font type. So there's different things we can set. Font size would be another one. So we basically go, okay, turn the font green, and then start here, type all this in green, and then end your font change right there, and then go back to whatever it was before. And the last one, and this one fell off my page just a little bit, but I think you can see it. It says the body background color equals ivory. And so it's the background behind the text that's going to be ivory. And then the font color is still green. So, and then of course we have to, and I did this correctly, you have the font tag, and then the font tag is sort of the first one to close again, and then the body is on the outside. So let's just go ahead and give those a try in our survey. And you can pick different colors in your workbook. Just under the slide for this page here in your workbook, I put a couple of links, and one of them goes to the W3 schools with all the different colors. And so when you look at that, let's go here real quick. You can tell that you can put in the colors by name, for example, aqua, but you can also put them in by this code right here. And the same, for all the different colors. So those are sort of the choices you have in terms of color. Okay, so let's give that a try. I'll go back to my survey, onto my spreadsheet, and I'm just gonna fiddle around with this label right here. Okay, so let's say I wanted to make this bold. And then I'll put an end bold at the end. Okay, so if I save this and see what it looks like. Well, you can see it's a little bit more bold. I'm going to put in my italics tags as well. I think that might be even more visible. So I have to put in the beginning and the end. So let me save that. And you can see it now shows up in italic. All right, so the next thing we wanted to try was the font color. And I can just pile right on and just do it all. So I'll start up a tag, and I'll just say font, the color equals, and I can just pick any of the colors on that W3 school page. But let me just go ahead and, well, let's make it green. And that goes into single quotes. And then I put this font tag on the inside. I'm just going to put it again on the inside on the other side. And font. Okay, so let me save that and see if my text turns green. It looks like my text completely turned invisible. So let me just go ahead and take out the italic and the bold. It should work, but of course, in a class. And I think it's not working because I didn't put in my second quote there. Okay, So I'm assuming that none of you are bored listening to this because you're trying this yourself now, right? Okay, so it turned green, and let's try one more and then we'll move on. Okay, back to my spreadsheet. Not that one, this one. And I am going to put in a body color. So that's going to be like a background. Okay, so body, and then the value, the parameter that I want to set is the background color equals, and I'm just gonna set that pretty obnoxious, and I'll just make it blue. That's gonna look terrible with the green lettering, but we're just experimenting. Okay, so if all is well, the background should have turned blue. And there we go. So not that I recommend this color scheme, but this is how you would do it. Okay, so with that, let's move on to our pool tables. So this is really, I think, like a 4-part exercise. So we're gonna build quite a survey. We'll do that first, using a pool table in the survey. And then we'll create a launch map, like a web mapping application that will launch that survey. And then eventually we'll just create a dashboard out of that. So we're gonna leave this survey, we're going to create a new one and stick with that for quite a while. So let me give you a little bit of an introduction about the next survey and what kind of information is on there. First off, this is what pool data would do for you. And for all the people from Water Resources, this should look very familiar to you. It helps you pre-fill your survey. So in this case, you would you type in a unique number that corresponds to a flow meter out in the field to measure water. And then you can tell that based on that, different items are pre-filled, including this little map right here that zooms to a very specific location where this particular flow meter, and so the pump that's pumping the water out of the ground, and then the meter attached to that pump is located. So we're going to build something similar, but this is the idea. This is where we're going. And so this, I think, is one of the more helpful tools inside Survey123. I mean, it was a real revelation when we at Water Resources discovered for the first time that we could do this. The beauty too is that all this information is stored in a table with your survey. So if somebody goes out in the field, that table is actually stored on their phone itself. So if they don't have any cell connectivity, because the table is stored on their mobile device, they can still get to it and have all this information in their back pocket. And so for the next example, it almost seems maybe a little bit silly, in the example. But as you could see, for example, from the Water Resources, you could tell, the data that was collected in the previous year, or in this case, if you're going back to the same flow meter on the same pump, well, there's no point, re-entering the location, or, this flow meter is going to be there for years to come, and maybe you need to collect the serial number. Well, that's going to be the same over and over and over again. So, but you still want it because you still want to have a complete record. And let's say if they did put in like a new flow meter, well, then you can go look and you go like, well, that serial number is not correct. And so that would be your clue that you need to change that and that there's a new pump there. So additionally, you might want extra background information. So maybe you're going back to do an inspection, and it might be really helpful to have your notes from the previous inspection, like right inside your survey. So you just have that background information, and then you do your new inspection. So I think this is one of the more helpful parts of Survey123 that it allows you to do this. Okay, so in this case, we are using data from the MPI registry. So MPI stands for the National Provider Identifier, and providers are doctors, so different types of doctors all over the country. So what they do is they would go into this NPI registry, they would type in their information, then they are assigned a 10-digit number, and that number basically helps keep track of, their insurance claims, and the transmission of health records and things like that. So it's a unique identifier for each one of those doctors. So I used information from that registry to get a list of all the primary caregivers in Boise, Idaho. So this is what we're going to do. We are going to create a survey designed for doctors. So they're the survey takers, and they need to provide information about their practice. And we want to use the information from the ANPI together with using that pool data information. Figure my neighbor is starting to drill something. Can you guys hear that? Okay, maybe not, then I'll just keep going. So use that pool data information to sort of pre-fill their survey with this NPI data, and then we can go from there. Okay, so this is what the table looks like, a snippet out of it. So we have the name of the doctor, which will, that's the first question on the survey, what's your name? And then based on that, as soon as we know that, let's say that they type in Noreen Womack, then we can look in this table and we can look up and see, well, this is her NPI number. And, yes, she's a primary care provider. She's accepting new patients. She's female. She speaks English. And this is her address. And here's the latitude, longitude of where her office is. And so that's what we'll try and use. So we want them to pick a name and then use the pool data table to fill in everything else, including using this latitude and longitude to get the geopoint, the little map in your survey, in the right location. So let's go ahead and do that. So we need to start out with a new survey. And again, I put the questions in that little snippets spreadsheet, so you don't have to start over. But we do need to start up a new survey. So I'll just click the square in the corner to get out of this one. I'll click on a new survey. I am going to call it the Boise Primary Care Doctors. And you don't have to do this, but I'm going to call it version 2 since I made version 1, to put this together. I'll pick the advanced template, and then I'll just go ahead and create the survey. And while that is spinning, I am going to go into my snippets here, and here is my my survey. Right here. Okay, let's copy that. Let's see what else I have open. This is my previous survey, so I'm just going to close that up. Here is my new survey. I can tell by the title, and I'll just go ahead and paste in all my questions. All right, and I'll save that to make sure that my survey turns out all right. So it says list name not on choices sheet. So let's revisit what that question looks like. So here I say select one name. And so my survey is looking for a list called name on my choices tab. So I'll just go ahead and I'll copy the word name. I'll go to my choices. And I'm just going to paste that in there because that's going to be the name of an entire list. And so what I want to put in there, because the question says select one doctor's name. So I want to get my entire list of doctors in there. And the easiest way to get that is from another table that I included in your packet. So that is the providers table. And this will also be our pool table that we're going to start using. But for now, let's just copy and paste all the providers from there. Okay, so there's my table. And I showed you a preview of that on my slide earlier. But here are the names. And so just to make it easier, I already sorted them alphabetically for you. And another thing that I did for you, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, is that I took all the commas out of the USPS address. And I'll talk about this a little bit later because commas are not your friend when it comes to Survey123. Okay, but we're talking about names. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy all those names and then go back to my list and paste them in there. And since the name, we need a name and we need a label. Now, if you remember from the previous class, is that for the name, we can have spaces, but only if we're using a select one question, which this is. This is a select one question. If this was a survey where you could select more than one doctor, then we would have to replace all the spaces with underscores, and we probably have to take out the dashes too. But for now, since it's a select one, we're good. And every row here needs to have that name. So a quick way to fill it in is go to the bottom right corner of the cell and give it 2 quick left-handed clicks, and it will just fill up the whole thing. Okay, so we got our names on the choices sheet. And copying those names from the same table that we will be using for the pool data table is actually a really good idea, because the way that we'll find information from that pool table is by asking them for a question, for example, Allison Reynolds, and then looking up Allison Reynolds on that pool table. So we want to make sure it is spelled exactly the same, like not accidentally an extra space between the two of them or the S forgotten. We want to make sure that both of them are equal. So copy and paste. So with that, let me save and let's see if my survey is still complaining. Now you can see my previous error is still there. So that doesn't mean that this one's not working. Okay, so I'm just gonna clear out a previous error. Okay, so this worked. So people can choose their name. This is not very stylish and just kind of hard to get through, especially if you're on a mobile phone. You know, somebody's going to be scrolling to try and get through this entire list. So I think before we do anything else, we need to go back to our survey and change the appearance of this question. And a really good type to put this in is the autocomplete. I must have spun right by there. Autocomplete, there we go. So let me save that again. And I think that will be a whole lot easier for people to look up. Okay, so now it becomes a drop down. And so, for example, if Noreen Womack, and I keep hammering on her because she was pediatrician for my kids. All right, there we go. So what we now want to do is, as soon as we pick Noreen Womack, we want everything down here to be populated like immediately. Okay, so let's go ahead and see how we can do that. Useful function styling, we've done grids, pool data tables. Yeah, this is where we're at from current slides. Okay, so we've done that. We've discovered the error, and we have created this name list. Okay, so as soon as they fill in the physician's name, then we can look it up here. So for example, Noreen Womack, And then we can take this NPI number and stuff it in there. We can grab the address and put it in there. The gender, we can enter it in here. So this is where we need to store this table with this survey and then set it up so it's pulling this data out of this particular table. So let's do that next. So I told you that the table was stored with the survey. So let's do that first. Let's store it with it. Okay, so back in my Survey123 Connect, we're finally going to click on this Files button. So what that does is it opens up a folder and it has, you know, for example, that spreadsheet with it that we keep editing. There's also a media folder. That's where we're going to put it. So let me open up the media folder. And then I need to find my exercise data. I'm going to take this provider's CSV file. I'm going to copy that and paste it in this media folder. So now it is stored with the survey, and the survey knows to go here to look for it. Okay. So let me close it out. We got that. We're still not done yet. And so that's right. This is the folder with all the extra information, and we just copied the provider into the media folder. Okay. And so we talked about this a couple of times already, but let's just review it just one more time. So as soon as a user picks from that list a doctor's name, that information is going to be stored in this doctor's name, you know, mailbox variable. And you can tell it's a mailbox or variable because it's in the $sign with the squirrely brackets. So for example, if you answer the physician's name is Allison Reynolds, then, you know, this mailbox here called the doctor's name now has the value Allison Reynolds in it. So if somebody were to ask, okay, who's now in the mailbox, then you would say, well, right now that's Allison Reynolds. All right. So with that, let's construct our pull data function. Okay, so it is called pull data, all lowercase, and every function goes in brackets. And then it's looking for four different parameters, four different things that it needs to know so it can pull the right number. All right, so first off, it needs to know, well, which table, what is your table called? So it knows to look in this media folder, but it still doesn't know what it's looking for in the media folder. And so it's going to look for this providers.csv file. Now, since that is always a CSV file for this function, you don't have to put in the period CSV. It knows that, but it does need to know the name of the file. So that was called providers, and you just copied it over. Then it's going to ask, okay, so well, what are you looking for? So let's say that we are working on this second question where they have to fill in this NPI number. Then you say, well, we're looking for the NPI number. So in this provider table, look in the column that has the header NPI. That's the one we're looking for. Okay, so I guess we narrowed it down. It's going to be one of those numbers. But you still need to tell it like which row it needs to pick it from. So to pick that, you say, well, pick it from the row in the table where the name in the name column. So let's say that we picked Noreen Womack in our example. So it says, well, look for the name where this name is equal to what we picked in the survey itself. So it says where the name, so this corresponds to this column here, is equal to what we put in this doctor's name mailbox. And again, we have to use the $sign and the squirrely brackets because we are referring to the answer of a different question that was put in one of those mailboxes. So this is how that would work. And so it would then look here, go, oh, well, there's Noreen Womack. That's the name that matches this name. And let's just look up the NPI. So that's the NPI, comes from there. The name comes from here in this provider table. And then the doctor's name comes from a previous question in the survey. So I know this might be hard the first time you're looking at this to wrap your head around, but when you think about it a little bit, it does make sense how it works. Okay, so let's give that a try. Let's put in this pool data function, and I believe I also put those in your copy and paste widgets. All right, so that's this one right here on row 36. So I'm just gonna go ahead, copy that. Then I need to go to the spreadsheet for my survey. So this right here is a calculation. Required message, need to go to the right. There's my calculation field. I need to put it in for the NPI number because that's the question I'm trying to pre-fill. And so I'll put it in here. Okay, let's see how that works. All right, so I'll pick a physician, and you can tell it immediately pops up this NPI number. Now doing the rest of the questions is pretty much the same deal. So let's see if we can construct those pool data equations. So let me go back to my PowerPoint slide. Let's see here. Looks like I got two slides going on. Okay, from current slides. So we've done that. Okay, here we are. So we constructed the one for the NPI. So for the address, the first part here is the table. What is the table called? Well, we're pulling it all from the same table, and that table is called providers. So that's the first part, and again, single quotes. Okay, the next part asks, grab the value from the column with the header that has the answer you're looking for. And so for the address, we want to look in this field that has the address in it. For the gender, we would want to look in this field. And so we can fill that in, just telling it which column to look. And then to tell them which row we need to look in, we need to say, well, look in the row where this name is equal to the doctor's name that a user just filled into the survey. So we'll use the same as we did with earlier. So hopefully this is starting to make sense. So with that, let's just fill in the other questions. So I put it in the snippets one. So we already did the NPI. I'll just copy the next four. Copy, and then I'll go to my survey. I can paste them in there, right there, and let's see if that works. My computer is being very slow today. And I'm thinking the more people watch, the slower it gets. Okay, moment of truth. So let's pick this doctor. You can see it populated the address, the gender, if they're accepting new patients, and the language that they speak. So looking at the time, I'm gonna fast forward just a little bit because the only thing that we have left to do is add in the location, our geo point. So a good way to discover that, and let me go here real quick, I'll just go here. If you click on new survey and you go into your samples, you can do a search for location. And this example right here, it says calculate location from CSV, explains to you how you can take a latitude, longitude from your pool table, format it, and then put it in your survey so your geopoint shows up in the right spot. So instead of having you actually go in and open this up and discover this for yourself, let's copy them over from that snippets worksheet. Okay, so let me go to the snippets here, copy and paste. So here we have the latitude, longitude. Let's just copy those over. Now put them at the bottom. And so the next thing that we need to do, and we still need to give it a label, so let me just copy paste those as well. We need to grab the latitude and longitude from that pool table, which if you remember is there's two columns with that, and then we can feed that into this location calculation. And so let me just go ahead here and copy those four, and then we'll take a look at it. And of course, the beauty is that you can, copy and steal all this information from those samples or from this class or from the snippets worksheet. All right, so just like before, we are pulling data from the same providers table. So when we looked at the table, you could tell that we had a latitude and longitude field called lat and long. So it tells to go in the lat, and wherever this doctor's name matches up is the latitude we pick, the longitude we pick. Then this location calculation, I just copied directly from that sample that basically just formats it in a way that if you put in your geopoint and you set it to that location calculation right here, it will actually just put it in the right spot. So with that, let me go ahead and save this. And of course, I need to go back to my survey here because I left it and changed it. It's asking me if I want to update it, which I do. And then I guess while we're waiting, I can see two main advantages of putting the location in this pool table. So the first one is that for those doctors, since we already know where they are, it really prevents them from having to, scroll around on the little map and do that. The other thing is that if you put those results back on a map, which you probably will, right? Because you're collecting this information, I'm assuming that you want to look at your collected information. This appears in the right spot. And so, for example, if next year you're doing the same survey again with the same doctors who are in the same location and you put it on the same map, at least you know that those points perfectly line up and you don't get like a cluster of points that is supposed to be the same thing, but it's all like spot on. Okay, so let me grab a physician's name. And there it is. My little map, and it just shows up. If I were to pick a different doctor, then we get a different location. As you can tell right here. So I would say this has been very helpful anytime I am making a survey, is to use those pool tables. Okay, so let's see what is next. So we have done the pool tables. Let's see. I think we discovered that it works. We have forwarded through that. Let's go ahead and make sure that we set our map levels correctly, because later on we will take a couple of surveys with this new survey. So we're going to publish it. Then we are going to open it up in Survey123 Connect. Not Connect, just the Survey123 app. And then we're going to look at this data that you're collecting on a map. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. But and then later on, we're going to use them to create reports and to make sure that the little maps that appear on your report make sense, like they're not too far zoomed out or too closely zoomed in. We do want to set our zoom levels. So let's go ahead and do that. Past here. Okay, so back to my survey. To set the map options, click on map, If you got the older version, then there are settings along the top. When you click there, then on the sub menu, one of the items there is called map, and you can click there and change it. All right, so I want you to set the preview map zoom level to 9. That seems to work well. And the detailed zoom level to 16. Oh, just hit the plus here, 9 and 16. Okay. So with that, let's just go ahead and publish your survey. And while it is doing that, I am going to fire up my Survey123 app, which for some reason appears with this tiny, tiny icon in my my apps here, but it will work. Okay, so my publishing is complete. Let me click OK on that. Just gonna minimize my Survey123 Connect for a while, and I am going to find my my new survey. So you need to sign in. So click on the top right. If you're not signed in, you need to sign in with your ArcGIS Online account. Then click on Download Surveys. And this is the one that I was just working on. So I'll just click on the little heart. It will download it. And when I go back, it should show up. Let's see. This is what happens if I have two of the same. I thought I downloaded it. Downloads. Training, Boise, care, doctors. Okay. This is the right one. Okay, so I am going to update my survey. And now I can collect information. So I am going to talk about commas for a little bit, but I want you to go ahead and actually complete, maybe 5 or 6 of those surveys. So it's actually really straightforward because all you have to do is click on collect, pick a name, and everything is already pre-filled, and then just hit send. Okay, so while you're doing that, you're submitting surveys to your own survey. I'm going to talk about commas for a little bit. Okay, so I'm just gonna get started from the current slide. We've done that. And we've been through here. Watch out for commas. So in this particular pool table, I still have commas, and they are in CSV files. And CSVs stands for, well, I know that the C in CSV stands for comma. So the information in a CSV field is completely separated by commas. That's how it knows when to put things in one column or put it in the next column. So if you were to look at, for example, this USPS address here, let me see, there's my mouse. It would want to put that 305 East Jefferson Street, the first one here, in one column, and then move over, put Boise in the next column. So for example, if this is in column A, it would put Boise in column B, Idaho in column C, and the USPS address in column D. So it tends to get really confused if there's like commas in there, and you might see some strange behavior in your survey. And that is because there are commas in your pool data information. And this happens a lot, well, here, for example, with the addresses, but quite often people will pull in, for example, comments that have been collected during a previous, effort to collect information. And people tend to put commas in comments. So that is one place where you might be encountering them. So the safest bet, what I would recommend is when you have your pool data table in Excel, basically just use the replace function in Excel itself, find the comma, replace them all with a space, and then you will no longer have that problem. So I'm hoping you had a chance to enter a couple of surveys. So next, let's create a launch map and see if we can launch our surveys from there. Okay, so let's open that up in, let me see here. I think my handout on my other computer just quit. Let's just open that up again. Okay, here we go. So if you can open up ArcGIS online and then sign in. So let's go there. Let's sign in. So we're going to do a little bit of ArcGIS online work. That might be a good refresher from the first class. Let me see, I need to go back just a little bit. Here we go, step 1. Okay, so click on content. And then we are going to create an item. Actually, let's see here. We're going to add an item, sorry. We're going to add an item from your computer. And so when we did the ArcGIS Online Part 1 class, we were in a web map and we would bring in a table and then turn that into a layer. We are going to do the same thing, but we're doing it outside a map. And actually, I like this way better because when you do it in a map, it's there, but it's not really there. It's not an official hosted layer. So since we want to do more work with this one, I would recommend going into your contents, clicking on add item, and then create a layer from a table right there. So the provider's CSV file that we've been using actually has a latitude, longitude field with it. So let's go ahead and use that. So from your exercise data, click on providers, and we're just going to open that up. Okay, so for the title, I'm just going to call this the primary caregivers in Boise, Idaho. I'll give it some tags. For example, primary care is a good tag. I am going to give it the tag temp. Anytime I do something that's like an example or anything like that, I use the temp ones, so I know later on when I'm cleaning out my stuff that all the temp ones I can delete without any issues. And let me type in Boise. There we go. Okay, now this is the key here. It says publish this file as a hosted layer. So there it just becomes stored in there and it allows you to do a lot more with it as opposed to if you were to bring in a table in a web map. And similarly, I know some of you like to use the maps for Office. That also is a little bit of a ghost. So again, I would recommend using this technique rather than the others. Okay, then it's asking how we would like to put all the different providers on the map. So it guessed that we have coordinates. And then when we scroll down in this little table, we can see that it correctly found the latitude and longitude and assigned it the right fields to it. All right, let me go ahead and add this item. So let's go ahead and then it's created. We can open it up in a map. There we go. And if we want, we can style it. So I am a big fan of push pins. So I'll just click on my single attribute options. And under basic, I can find a push pin, but of course you can pick anything you like. For the push pin, 25 seems to be a pretty good size. And then let me go ahead and save my map. So I'll have it to give it a name. So let's call this the primary care providers in Boise web map. For text, I'll put in my temp tag again, my primary care in Boise. And I'll just store it in my main folder. At least I know I can look for it. Because it's a temp, I can delete it later on. So again, I used this before, so this will work for you, but I'll have to give it a slightly different name. So let me go ahead and save that. And let me click OK on the symbols. Done with that. Saved. Okay, so next we want to configure those pop-ups. So when you click on here, it actually has a link in here that will then open up the survey for the primary caregiver and automatically pass in the name Ryan Atwood because we know that's him. So we want to basically have it open up to almost like basically a pre-filled survey. So let's go through those steps next. And I need to go back to my PowerPoint. So let's go there. We've done that. Okay. So this is what we're going to do. We are going to construct a URL. And that URL we will put in our pop-up, which will then do everything that I was just talking about. This is what it looks like. So the instructions for opening up a survey in the Survey123 app is a little bit different than the instructions for open it up in a web browser. And we talked about that those are the two ways that people can do a survey. But let's take a look at this whole string of numbers and symbols there. Okay, so the first part over here opens up the Survey123 app. Those are the instructions. The second part tells you which survey. And so every survey that anybody ever created has a different item ID. So even though the survey you're creating right now looks similar to the one I created, the ID will be different. And so this particular sequence of letters and number will just point to your survey. So it needs to know that that's the survey it needs to open up. Then this last part there, it's going to pass information from your pop-up. So basically from that layer that we just created, it's going to take the name of the doctor, and then it's going to pass that into the survey into a field called the doctor's name. Okay, so I think it's helpful to maybe pull up some of the other information that we have. Okay, so this is the layer that we just created. And so if you were to look at the pop-up right now, and you look at the attributes, there is a field called name. And that is, the name, each point will have a name associated with it. When you put that in squirrely brackets, it becomes like, again, like a mailbox, a variable. And so in essence, the point that you clicked on, let's say it was Dr. Noreen Womack, it will put that into the name mailbox. So then this would be Noreen Womack. Now this doctor's name should look familiar because that appeared in our survey. We put it in our survey. So it's basically saying take this name and put it in the doctor's name mailbox in the survey. So it says the doctor's name in the survey is equal to the name on the map of that layer that we just created. Similarly, in the browser, there's only minor differences. So the first part's different. It says open the browser and the Survey1 website. So you can tell that's a little different. The unique ID for your survey, still the same. And then where there's like an ampersand here, on the URL, it's for the browser, it just asks you for a question mark, because then it knows that everything after the question mark are those different values that you want to, pass into your survey. Okay, So in your handout, you have the section, and I am right now on page 19. It says info for the slide below. So I am going to open up a text document, and I am going to paste those 2 lines in there. There they are. Okay. Now copy that, open up Notepad, and I have found that to be a really easy way to construct pool data functions to any kind of function. It's kind of like a scratch pad where you can kind of construct things before you either put it in a survey or in this case put it in a pop-up on your map. Okay, so in my pop-up, I'd like to put both in there so people can choose when they get in the pop-up if they want to go one way, open it up in the browser, or the other way and open it up in the Survey123 app. Okay, so most of it is already there except for this item ID, because this item ID is the one for the survey that I used yesterday. So where do you find that? So you need to go open up a browser, and let me just make this smaller. I need to find a browser. There's my Google Chrome. Okay. And I want to go to survey123.arcgis.com. Again, you need to sign in because I'm already signed in so many places. It just let me in. And there is my Boise Primary Care survey 2. And actually, I just switched over to the first one, but you click on the one that you just created. And in your browser, from this point to this point over here is your unique ID. So I'll go back to my notepad. I'll remove what is here and paste in the other number. So now I have those URL with the instructions of what I want to do. Okay, so armed with this, I can go back to my map and create those, the pop-up. Okay, so I have to see if I still have my map up somewhere because I have so many things open. Ah, there's my map, still up. Okay. So to go to the pop-up, I click on the 3 dots at the end here, and I'm going to go configure it. First of all, I'll just simplify the title a little bit and just have the name come up. For the display, I would like to use a custom attribute display, and then I'll click configure. So I want the user to see 2 options. So either they can take the survey in the Survey123 application, or they can take the survey in the web browser. All right. So now I need to create links that will actually do that. So let's start with the Survey123 application. So when I looked in my browser, and one hint or tip rather is if you have this wrapped around inside your notepad and then you copy and paste it, I have found it doesn't work well. It just starts throwing errors, but for some reason, if you make sure that the entire URL fits on one line, it works. Okay, so I'm just going to highlight all of this, and then I am going to copy that entire line. Then in my custom attribute display, I'm going to highlight this line, click on the link button, and then I am going to paste in that URL, and then click on update. And we can do the same for the URL for the web browser. So back in the Notepad, I'll go ahead and I'll copy the second link, highlight the question or the line in my custom attribute display, click on the link button, and then click paste and update. And then OK. So in case you're wondering what that noise is, there's a helicopter flying over our house. OK, I'll click OK, and then we need to test it. So let me go ahead and take the survey in the Survey123 application. And I can tell that this is Ryan Atwood, so I want to make sure that that name is passed on correctly. All right, so let's click on a different one. Here is Anna Teresa Gabiola Shelton, and I want to take her survey in a web browser. And there it is, and you can tell that both of them are pre-filled. So then I think another nice thing to do, and again, this worked really well when I was still at Water Resources and we used a launch map like this. When people did the inspections for the flow meters every fall and spring, they would go and look at them all and read the meters that came with it. But then it would be really nice for them to know which surveys had been completed, especially since you had multiple people going around just basically tackling this large group of flow meters. If they all have it back on their map, they can kind of tell which ones have already been done and which ones have not. So the easiest way to do that, and I'm skipping again a couple of steps in the instructions because like before, I overestimate how much I can cover in 2 hours. So the instructions explain how you can create what's called a view layer. So next, what we're going to do is, let's just do one step at a time. So I am going to search for layers. And I want to add those Boise primary care doctors to my map. And let's see, this is the one that I did yesterday. And so I'll add those in. And one thing that I did in the instructions, and I did yesterday as well when I set this up, is I created a view layer of this layer. And I think we may have covered that in the ArcGIS Online part, first part. So what that does is it's a synchronized layer, but you can make the original editable, but the synchronized layer is only viewable, but you cannot edit it. But for now, let me just go ahead and put this one on the map. So this should have a couple of dots on it, and hopefully yours does too when you try it. Those are the surveys that I asked you to take earlier. Like after you published it, you opened up your Survey123 app, and then hopefully you took a couple of surveys. So I think it would be easier if we move them to the bottom and then maybe change the symbols just a little bit to make it a little bit easier to spot. So I'll just pick a circle. I'll make them light blue with a dark blue outline. So for the shape, I think if I make it a little bit bigger, it might be easier to see. And so I can tell which surveys have already been completed. And then also, of course, which ones still need to be done. Okay, so then the instructions go on. We've tried launching it. Then the instructions go on how to put this into a dashboard. And we only have about 15 minutes left. So I propose that I just demo that, and I'll just put this in a little dashboard for y'all. And that might just be a good teaser for the next workshop, which is all about dashboards. So if people take this in the field, especially if it's in an area with like cell coverage, they can just go into Safari and pull up like this map in a browser. So if you were to turn this into an app, you can see it in a browser. And so the dashboard that I'm going to show you is in essence one type that you can look at in the browser and that you can also launch surveys from. Okay, so I saved it. I'll go ahead and share it. And since this is just a demo, I'll just keep it to myself. I'm going to create a web app. I'll grab a dashboard. To distinguish it, I'll just type dashboard at the end here. So when I look at my items, I can tell that this is the dashboard. So I'm done with that. So then this map will just appear in a dashboard. So I think it would be really cool to see how many providers there are on the whole map. So how many of those pins, how many surveys have been completed, and sort of maybe on like a dial, like how many that is, the percentage of surveys that have been completed. So I'll go ahead and start adding some items to it. So first I'll add in an indicator. So that's going to ask me, okay, do you want to grab some data from the primary caregivers, which is the data that we just created that has all the doctors in it, the pins, or do you want to use the survey results? So let's start with this one to get a sense of how many providers there are. So pick the right data. It's showing me a count. So one for each record that's in there, one for each doctor. For the indicator, I'm just going to say this is the number of providers. And one thing that bugs me a lot is that it says last updated a few seconds ago. This gives people the impression that this data is continuously changing and it just was updated a couple of seconds ago. And so unless you have like data that continuously comes in, I would actually just take that out. And you can do that on the General tab by taking out the last update text. All right, so there's the first one. I want to do the same thing for the number of surveys that have been collected. So a really easy way to make another indicator that's pretty similar is to duplicate it. And then I'll just configure the change. So in this case, I want to get the count of the number of surveys. That's 12. And instead of provider, I'm just going to say that's the number of surveys. Okay, so let's click done on that. And then I can go ahead and click and drag them over here. So if you want to try this on your own, the instructions will tell you how to do it. And if you want to learn more, then join the training in a couple of weeks later on this month. So the last thing I would like to add in here is a gauge. So that's kind of like a speedometer, right? To see how fast you're going. So let me start with the number of surveys that we have. And so it says, well, we have collected 12, which is non 12% out of 100, but we don't have 100 surveys. We have more than that. So for my minimum value, 0 is fine. For my maximum value, well, I'd like to get the count of the other layer. So I'll just grab all the doctors layers that are in there, and I'll take their count. And then on my gauge, I can tell them to put it in as a percentage. I'll take out that it was updated in the last few seconds. I'll click done. And now I can tell that 10.5% of all my surveys have been completed. And I know if you're not familiar with dashboards, that probably seems a little bit fast, but hopefully you can also tell that this is not that hard to do. And I bet if you tried this on your own with the instructions, you can do it. And again, there's another training coming up. All right, with that in mind, let me just pull up this slide right here. Okay, upcoming events from current slides. So the end of this month is all about dashboards. For those of you who has attended workshops before, or maybe some of you who have not, there's sort of two types of workshops going on. There's the training that you are attending like right now, but also once a month we have a 1 hour when people from different agencies, all state employees from different agencies, talk about a specific topic in GIS for a couple of minutes. And the reason we're doing that is sort of twofold, because first of all, we all work for the same employer. And so I think it might be interesting to meet other people in the state that are doing similar things to you. So they might give you some ideas, you might have some follow-up questions, and so at least you can get to identify them. But the second part is it might give you ideas just to see how other people are using technology that you also have. So this month is all about dashboards. So on the 23rd, a Tuesday between 3 and 4, so it's just 1 hour, and those folks are going to give a 5-minute presentation, 5 to 7 minutes. And then, of course, there's the introduction to dashboards. Then the month after, we'll actually do another one on field apps. I'm trying to get Esri to come in and do some training for us on using their new field apps. So if you are using Collector, it's being replaced by this field apps. You might be interested in that, and then I'll follow that up with a workshop about field apps. And then the month after, I want to just see more examples of people stringing different apps together. So just the example I had, we got like a web map that launches a survey, which then can be shown on a dashboard where you're basically just combining different tools. So I thought it would be interesting to see what different people are doing in that regard. Okay, so we have about 9 minutes. So I do want to talk a little bit about reports. And just like before, I think it might be good to do this as a demo. So let me go ahead and get out of here, surveys. So to do all this, we need to go to the Survey123 website. And so while here, we'll just click on the survey that we just did. And to look at the results, I mean, the Analyze has some good sort of statistics and a summary of the information there, but it's really on the data page where you can download different things and where you can create reports. So in terms of downloading, it is pretty straightforward. So you just click the export button, and either you can export it as a CSV, an Excel file. If you're using Google Earth, you can download it as a KML file and then put those points on Google Earth, a shapefile or a geodatabase. If you have pictures that you've taken inside your survey and you want to keep those, you would want to use the file geodatabase because that's the only format here that will actually preserve your pictures with it. And I would also say that if you are making changes to your survey and just kind of messing around, I would suggest always downloading your data as a file geodatabase before you make any changes, or as a shapefile if there is no pictures with it. But this way, if you do mess up your survey, then at least you still have the data, which you can then put into a new survey if you have to. But at least nothing is lost. So I would recommend the file geodatabase as a backup, especially if you're using other ArcGIS software. So that brings us to the reporting function. So let's click on report. You can tell that you can export all the records or only the ones that you have selected. You have to select a template, and so for the first time you do this, you actually need to create a template. It doesn't come pre-filled with a template. So the first thing I would do if I were you is click on Manage Templates and download your sample template. So they've made some changes recently where you can have individual records. So that's basically just like one sheet, one printout essentially per survey that's been collected, or a summary that basically tells you how many surveys have been collected. And the combined is really just one document that has the individual records as well as the summary. Okay, so if you download this sample template, it is pretty straightforward. And I think I put a copy in the slides, so that might be the fastest to just pull it up there. Choose. Maybe I did not. Okay, we'll just download it right here, the individual record. And while it does that, let me just look at the template here. And you can tell that this template consists of just regular text and then text that is put in those $ squirrely brackets. This is the same deal as inside Survey123 Connect. So anytime you see a notation like this, it will just basically replace that with what the value is of that specific survey. So here it will just replace the doctor's name with what people selected in the survey as the doctor's name. And so what you can do, because this survey, the sample is pretty boring. So here's the example right there. It just says physician name, NPI number. So it just lists it all, like from top to bottom, the latitude, longitude, the calculation. And so there might be some things in there that you don't like the formatting of, or maybe some items that you don't want to see. So what you can do is you can create your own template. And in your exercise data, I actually included one of those templates. So this is a condensed template right here that still has, you know, those squirrely brackets and $ in it, but it just basically formats it into a table like this. So let's see what happens if we use this particular template. And so that is my condensed template. I loaded it up because you can click on add new template, load it in. Okay, so I'll just pick that for my different types of reports then. There's my condensed template. I can choose to create one big document that has everything in it, either continuous or every new survey starts on a new page, or I can just create an entire folder with like a survey for each one of them. So here again, you see that notation, the curly brackets and the $, and I think that those report names would be more readable if I were to change that and actually have the name of the doctor in the title itself. So it asks me where I want to save it. If I want to export this as an Excel file, as a Microsoft Word document, or a PDF file, it will show me the credits. And every report that you print is half a credit. So 1 credit is 10 cents. So in essence, you're paying 5 cents for every report that you're printing. Now, when you have an ArcGIS Online account, especially, you know, with us, with the state, we have quite a lot of credits. So it's not like you always have to, you know, pony up and pay because your license comes with credits. It's just a matter of managing them. But if you're planning to print, you know, 25,000 reports, you probably want to, you know, contact me and just kind of see if we have enough credits to cover that and what's going on. One thing you can do, and that we'll do here, is we can click on preview a sample report. So it will create those reports for free, but of course it will have, you know, a big watermark in there saying that it is a sample. So there's a couple of parts in this class because I can tell it's time to wrap this up. I think we've done most of it. The only thing we didn't get to are the webhooks. Take a look at that yourself. It's essentially just a way of setting up a flow that where somebody submits a survey that you can then automatically have it sent an email to you. So hopefully this will finish converting before 4 o'clock. But if not, then I want to thank you all for attending. I hope you found it useful. And hopefully we'll see you again in a couple of weeks. Meanwhile, if you have any questions, if you're trying this yourself and you get stuck, you know where to find me. And good luck.